through July 25th. Order yours today at EAA.org/fighters. Spirit of Aviation Week continues with a very special presentation on Stream 1 at 7 o'clock. Join Major John Waters as he hosts a panel of Air Force demonstration pilots, including Major Joshua Gunderson, an F-22 demo pilot, Major Garrett Schmitz, F-16 Viper demo pilot, Major Cody Wilton, an A-10 demo pilot, and Captain Kristen Wolf, F-35 demo pilot. They'll talk about their experiences flying some of America's high-tech jets at air shows around the country. Spirit of Aviation Week continues through Saturday. Visit EAAtogether.org for a complete schedule and a list of other activities.
The Aerolite has been designed to meet the criteria of FAR 103 and to provide a normal transition for those who are coming from private pilot flying, Cessnas and so forth, and also easy enough to fly with adequate performance, great performance actually, for those starting out with no flying experience at all.
Well, the big appeal of ultralights in general, or Part 103 ultralights in general, is it is an aircraft that you can fly without a pilot's license.
Since it is ultralight, there's no license for it. Therefore, there's no age requirement, so anybody can fly one.
He flew his Aerolite 103 from Virginia to Oshkosh this year, which was a 750-mile trip with 32 stops.
It's great. I've been fortunate. I've been able to fly lots and lots of different airplanes over the years, but I always tell people if I get 45 minutes to go out and fly for fun, I'll walk past everything else and get in an ultralight and go fly that.
I approached the EAA about the possibility of building one of these here and saying that we could do it in a week, and there's great interest in ultralights and bringing that back. So we're doing this through the week. We're into day 3 and we have done what you see behind me. The kit comes pretty complete if you look on the different websites. The cage is all built, all the structures pre-built, the wing panels are built. The day you unpack the Aerolite, you can start covering it. All the control surfaces you see in the background up against the wall, they were all done in 2 hours. The wings, we put the wings on this morning and covered them, put the ribs in. We did that in 2 hours this afternoon. The Aerolite goes together so simple, you know, a couple weeks on average builder can take care of it himself. Anybody that turns a wrench should be able to do that, do this kit. It's fairly simple, minimum tools to do it. So I appreciate what the EAA is doing, and I think that's going to be a big part of the rebirth of the Part 103 ultralights, and that's why we're doing the build here.
They want something that they can use for recreation, for the simple joy of going out and flying.
And one thing we have, ultralighters have, is the beauty of being in the environment. We can feel the wind, we can see the grass without windows or doors. Ultralight is just, it's freedom, it's fun, it's affordable, and it's just simple. It's just a wonderful way to enjoy the sport. It really is the freedom and spirit of aviation.
Introducing a revolutionary aircraft with a system that recalibrates the scale of safety. Welcome to the next chapter of the M600. The M600 SLS with Halo system. Halo enhances safety through innovative, groundbreaking features like Flight Stream 510, Surface Watch, Safe Taxi, Emergency Descent Mode, Level Mode, Auto Throttle. And now, M600 SLS is the first general aviation aircraft in the world that can safely land itself in the event that the pilot is unable. Thanks to Garmin Autoland, the system can be engaged with the simple press of a button, or if emergency descent or level mode has been activated.
Emergency Autoland activated.
Autoland safely guides the aircraft and your most precious cargo to the nearest airport, taking into account weather, terrain, runway size, wind, glide path, fuel on board, and time to destination. Peace of mind comes standard with the M600 SLS. The M600 SLS with Halo system, recalibrating the scale of safety.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to another Spirit of Aviation Week special interview. Joining me right now is Lieutenant Colonel Ross Franquemont, and he has flown the U-2 Dragon Lady for 14 years, along with, I'm sure, a few other aircraft in the inventory. And Ross, we want to thank you for joining us today in Spirit of Aviation Week, and you're coming to us from your house in Lincoln, California. How's the weather out there today?
That's right. It's not as hot as it's been. We've had a lot of days in the hundreds, but yeah, it's still Central Valley, California is still pretty hot. But yeah, all in all, sunny day out here.
Sounds good. Tell us a little bit about how you got involved in aviation.
So I grew up. I was in a small town in North Carolina called Lenore, and actually, the first time I got on a plane, I was 4 years old, and my grandparents, actually, my grandpa got a job running a battery factory over in Kenya, and one summer they actually invited us out there, and so I was only 4 years old. So and it's still very vivid in my memory that first time getting on an airplane, and my dad, he said I looked up at him after we got on that plane and took off, and he said. And I basically told him, this is what I want to do when I grow up. So fast forward a few years later, about 10 years old, I went out to the Air Force Academy with my family. I went to my uncle's wedding in Colorado. We took a little day trip down to Colorado Springs and visited the Air Force Academy. And I basically said, I want to go to the Air Force Academy once I'm out of high school. And basically, I kind of pushed toward that. I knew I wanted to be a pilot. I knew that was one of the best avenues to reach that goal. So 1995, I entered the Air Force Academy, did 4 years there. I got a degree in physics, emphasized in lasers and optics. And after that, graduated from there. I went on to undergraduate pilot training at Columbus Air Force Base. And out of that, I got a C-21. That's a Lear 35 over to Germany. And I think it's, a lot of people's dream first assignment to get the head out of the country, flying a Lear jet. And it really was a dream come true. I got, upgrade very quickly to aircraft commander and instructor, and got to fly all around Europe and Africa and Eastern Europe. And one of the more interesting missions that we did out of there was we actually went down to an island and picked up film that had been flown on the U-2. And we'd come in right after the jet had landed. They'd take the film, and this is a wet film, which we still occasionally use. And it's about 2 miles of film, and they put it in a canister and they put it on the C-21, and then we'd fly it back to Ramstein, where it either get flown back to the U.S. or developed there. And through that, I started talking to some of the U-2 pilots, and I'll never forget one of the first times I got to talk to one of the U-2 pilots. He had just come out of the jet. He was still in his spacesuit, and I'm like, hey, what was it like up there? And he was like, man, I saw things you wouldn't believe. And then he asked me, he's like, hey, do you want to be a U-2 pilot? Have you ever thought about that? And I was thinking, like, I know nothing about that. I probably have to be a fighter guy or something like that. And he's like, no, if you got the hours, you can apply. So I started looking into it. I kind of made that my next goal. And then in 2004, I actually went out and interviewed. It's a flying interview for the U-2. It's you go out for 2 weeks, and at the end of that 2 weeks, you end up flying 3 flights in the U-2. And they are not easy flights at all. They're 2.5-hour pattern sorties, and you just do touch and go after touch and go after touch and go. And they basically, it's kind of to see if you can follow the learning curve of the U-2, which is very steep, to learn how to land it. And it's amazing. You go from the first flight where you literally feel like you're back to pilot training, and you've never flown an aircraft before, and because the plane just doesn't do what you want it to do, what your brain is telling you it should be doing, it's doing something else. And by the end of that third flight, you start pick up a little bit of the muscle memory, and they felt like I was good enough to trainable, I guess, and they accepted me on in the U-2 program. So I started there 2005, soloed. So almost exactly 15 years ago. It was the first part of August in 2005. And from there, spent the next 14 years. I did have one break where I was on a desk for 3 years in Hawaii. So that was another, tough gig that somebody had to do, and it had nothing to do with U-2, but it was still a great gig. But for all the other time, I've been operational with U-2. And the last actual 4 years of my career, I spent in the training squadron with U-2. And that was probably, even with all the pictures and the great visuals and things like that, and all the great missions I got to do, that, teaching other guys how to fly that plane, that was definitely, for me, one of the most rewarding aspects of my career in the Air Force. But it was a long road to get there, but it was totally worth it. I was one of the most memorable things that I'll have ever done in my life.
Well, Ross, we're going to talk a little bit about missions in the U-2, but we're also doing something. We're trying something out here. We're live right now, thanks to the magic that is the internet. But we're also asking folks who are watching, if you're on Facebook Live or YouTube, the comment section, go ahead. If you've got a question, go ahead and type it in, and we've got folks who are going to transcribe them, and we'll see if we can get the relay system to work and get some comments and questions from our audience this afternoon. Tell us a little bit
certainly
about the typical mission. I mean, many of us have seen YouTube footage of the takeoffs and landings of the Dragon Lady, and the airplane is called that specifically because it is a little odd to fly. But as a pilot, as you got used to it, tell us a little bit about the whole process from suiting up to getting it back in the chocks at the end of the day.
So it definitely, obviously, one of the most unique aircraft that is out there. And for us, a mission, it actually started pretty much the day prior, because you're going to be sitting in a spacesuit, you're going to be strapped into an ejection seat for 9, 10, 12 hours at a time. You're not going to be able to get up or do anything like that. So you have to get yourself physiologically ready to go on a trip like that in the jet. So you're eating right. Everyone gets to know their body really well. So um, you basically you have to show up, obviously well rested and well fed, and um, you would show up about 2 hours prior to takeoff. Um, you do all the normal pilot stuff, because you have to check NOTAMs, you have to check weather and all that kind of stuff, because you might be miles above the typical weather out there while you're on the mission, but you're going to have to take off and you're going to have to land uh, eventually, and you have to go through all that stuff. So you got to do all the normal pilot stuff, and you're meeting up with your chase car pilot um, who's going to be driving the chase car, and it's another U-2 pilot, and his job is probably the biggest part of his job is that he has to be ready. If I come in and say, hey, my stomach's not going to take this mission today for whatever reason, he's got to be able to step in and actually fly the mission for me. But we're basically meeting up. It's basically like a flight lead wingman kind of relationship with the chase car pilot. So he's supporting you all along the whole preparation for the flight. The Around an hour or so prior to takeoff, you're going to separate the chase car pilot, who we actually call the mobile. He's going to head out to the aircraft. He's going to take all your stuff, and he knows exactly how you want the aircraft set up because you've told him or written it out for him. And when you go TDY with these guys for months on end, you get to know each other pretty well, know how people like stuff. So he's going to take everything out. He's going to do the full walk around of the aircraft. He's going to get everything ready inside the aircraft. And on a full mission, there might be 5 or 6 different contractors worth of sensors on that equipment. They're all out there. This thing looks like they're preparing, the space shuttle for launch, because there's hoses everywhere. There's wires going everywhere on the aircraft, and everyone's uploading stuff to their own sensors and checking them. For me, as a pilot, I'm going to head back and I'm going to start the process of getting in the spacesuit. And that starts around an hour prior to takeoff. For most of my time in the U-2, it was actually, the rule was you had to be on oxygen an hour prior to takeoff. We've made some modifications of the cockpit, and that's actually changed for the modified cockpits. You don't have to be on oxygen for an hour anymore, but most guys still try to get as much close to an hour breathing pure oxygen, and that's just to try to get rid of the nitrogen out of your system. But that process basically starts with, you're going to have to take off the flight suit. You put on some kind of long underwear underneath. If you're going to be flying over a really cold area, they always say dress to egress. So the spacesuit doesn't provide a whole lot of thermal protection. So if you're flying over the Arctic or something like that, you're going to put on some like long Patagonia thermal underwear or something like that. You'll go out, and there's actually a team of the spacesuit technicians that are going to actually help you get into the spacesuit, and the PSPTS, or Physiological Support and Physiological Training Squadron. They do all the maintenance on the spacesuit. They're the ones that put you in. They also do all the preparing the seat kit, and actually they're the ones that strap you into the seat. So they're a very integral process to making sure the mission actually happens the way it's supposed to. But a team of technicians are going to get you into the spacesuit. There's a supervisor watching the whole way, and because it's obviously one mistake could be life-threatening, in the event of an emergency. They get you in the suit. They have to put the suit on. Obviously, the helmet, the gloves lock on, and as soon as you lock that helmet on and close it down, they start 100% oxygen, and that's kind of starts what they call your O2 time. So you get locked in. They have to put a harness on you that's going to actually attach into the ejection seat. And then they run through a series of tests, leak tests, to make sure that the suit isn't going to leak air. They can inflate it, because the suit's main job is there. It's primarily to make sure you don't go hypoxic, and also to make sure you don't lose pressure around your body. And that's what a full pressure suit essentially is going to. It's just a little cabin around you to make sure that you don't get into a lethal zone with the air pressure around you. For most of my time flying, the cockpits were set up where they're only, when you're up at 70,000 feet, they're only pressurized about 29,000 feet. And so when you're sitting in the spacesuit, that actually, it's not inflated because you want to be able to move around and stuff like that. And your body's actually sitting at 29,000 feet. And it's designed, if the cabin were to say suddenly rapidly rise because of a leak or an ejection or something like that, the suit actually going to lock in pressure at 35,000 feet around your body. So it'll keep you alive. We all do it in the altitude chamber. We actually ride the altitude chamber to up to 75,000 feet or so, and it let the suit actually keep you alive in the for real in the altitude chamber. So you get to see what it's like. Not a real comfortable experience, but you basically once they finish all the tests, they're actually going to drive you out to the jet. We try to orchestrate this so by the time the mobile's done with everything there at the jet, you're ready to arrive. You get into the jet. You're actually on a portable cooler at the time, and which is both providing air into your suit, cool air, and your oxygen that you're breathing. That's going to be carried by one of the suit technicians behind you. They then get to work. They strap you into the seat. Supervisor comes on, makes sure that you are completely strapped in. There's no mistakes been made with that. Again, there have been mistakes I've seen, luckily caught, where some, parachute riser wasn't connected right, things like that. But once all that's done, basically, the mobile has been, as your wingman, he's got the jet ready to go. You just take a few minutes, kind of orient yourself. And then when you give them the thumbs up, they're going to take you off of that vent, put you on the aircraft vent. And it's probably one of the least comfortable parts of the whole process, because you get put on the aircraft vent, but since there's no engine running yet, there is no vent. So until you get the engine running, you have no air coming into the suit. And it's, being in that suit, it traps your heat from your body so well that, in 10 to 15 minutes without air, you could easily be in like basically heat stroke kind of range, or heat exhaustion. So, it's kind of critical that all this happens very quickly. The mobile is going to do one last check over you after you're off the vent, make sure everything again is strapped in. He's going to close the canopy after you've shaken your hand, and he's going to get in the car. And then it's pretty much from there, it's starting up engines, make sure all the systems are good to go. And then your goal would be to hit the runway about your takeoff time. And for most of my time, again, you had to have at least an hour from that time you went on oxygen. And you tried to orchestrate it so all this would happen kind of seamlessly. There wasn't any big time where you had to just be sitting around doing nothing. You would take off, and from there you're booting up systems, you're getting all the sensors going. You're usually on a real-time data link. You're talking with a group of people that could be half a world away. These data links are great because you could talk to them. It sounded like they're talking like me and you are talking here, and they're the ones running the mission, that aspect of it from that end. And behind them there's a team of could be over 100 people who are actually involved with the intelligence collection on this one mission. And you look at some aircraft, RC-135, stuff like that, and they talk about their back end. Our back end was half a world away, but no less effective. And and they could bring people into the team that something came up, they could bring an expert in and switch people in and out and stuff like that. But you'd be up for like I said, 9, 10, 12 hours, whatever really the mission called for. Sometimes the missions need to be extended. and you had to be, you had to stay on top of, how much fuel you had, how much, how much time you could actually be there. If you're having to travel a ways or a lot of missions, I had to fly for, 2.5 hours just to reach the area where we're going to be collecting on. So you had to always keep that in the back of your mind that, I'm going to have to fly this thing back, 2.5 hours home. I have to keep an eye on my fuel and also on myself, so it's make sure I'm, physiologically up for doing that. And, I'd say some of these missions were totally, where I had to be totally focused on helping out people on the ground, and you're helping, there are Army troops on the ground, there's JTACs, and we're working closely with certain operations going on in the ground. And then there are other missions that we had more of a hands-off approach. There's a lot that's just collecting. They're taking the imagery, and it's the mission's kind of running itself, and I don't have to be as involved with everything that's going on. So to get done with, you're coming back home, preparing everything. Usually by the end of 10 hours, the cockpit is a complete disaster zone of boards and pencils and things like that. And I had my camera, of course, but it's, you get everything kind of prepped, put away. You have to start down about 25 minutes or so. It takes about 25 to 30 minutes to descend and land from altitude. And so you basically come in for landing. Normally on a mission, we're not practicing any kind of emergency stuff or anything like that. So we're going to be our full flaps and all of our drag out, and we're going to try to make a nice straight in landing normally. And that chase car pilot, the mobile, who throughout the whole mission, his job is actually also to kind of be monitoring what's going on at home, and say there's a big front coming in and it's going to make the crosswinds go out of limit, which 15 knot crosswind limit for the jet. He needs to be able to be like, hey, we need to recall him back home, or he needs to start max enduring to save fuel because it's going to be a couple extra hours up there. That's part of his job as well, to kind of be on that end. But when I'm coming in land, his job is, but he's going to be there beside the runway. And then there's a lot of footage you've probably seen on YouTube. I got some on my website and everything of the mobile running in on the aircraft. And his job is it's kind of like I would say performing like a turning rejoin on an aircraft. You're using visual cues on the aircraft, and you're accelerating, turning, using the angles to maneuver the car. So he's going to, at the last minute, it's going to lag just behind the aircraft, and, hopefully drop in around 50 to 100 feet right behind the aircraft. And then he's going to make calls from about 10 feet down to help the aircraft land. And, part of that is because, the aircraft is set up with, it's a bicycle gear. So there's a center main gear and there's a tail wheel. So probably one of the last tail draggers out there operating in the Air Force. But when you're coming down final, that tail is quite a bit higher. If you're looking at it from the side, the tail is higher than the main gear, and you have to land on the tail wheel first. So the way you do that is the chase car pilot, he's going to be looking at your main gear mainly, and he's going to be calling that from 10 feet down. So 10, he's going to basically be calling 10, 8, 6, and so forth down. And the way that he says that gives me a lot of information. If he says 10, 6, 2, I know I'm screaming at the ground, and eventually, we say, the mobile goes from advisory calls, which, he's just advising my altitude, to directory calls, which either saying hold it off, right rudder, left rudder, whatever. Because, since you're on that bicycle, while you're having to keep the main gear from crashing into the runway, you got that tail gear back here. If tailwind's or the crosswind's gonna blow your tail out. So you're actually gonna nose into the wind, and so you have to counteract that with the rudder to keep that bicycle straight. Um, and so while you're doing that, you're obviously you're having to also work the wings. You got 50 feet of wing on each side of you. It's over 105-foot wingspan. So you're trying to keep those wings level. And as you're coming down again, you're going to try to get that main gear to 2 feet, and then you're going to try to hold it at 2 feet. And the mobile is going to hopefully just be calling 2 feet, 2 feet. If he calls 3 feet, okay, I'm rising up a little bit. I need to kind of let the jet settle back down. Or if he's calling inches, hold it off. I'm going to have to do something to get the aircraft back in the air. Because the worst thing is to land on the main gear first, because what that's going to do is going to rebound the jet back into the air. And a lot of times, we talk about you learn about PIOs, and even in the most basic of pilot training scenarios, you learn about how a pilot trying to counteract an action and just making it worse. And that's exactly what happens in the U-2. If you bounce on the main gear, you're just going to bounce, and then you're going to bounce again even more, and then you're going to be up in the air, 6 feet in the air, and the jet's going to completely stall then, and then you're going to break something. So, when you're flying this aircraft, this is about a $20 million airframe itself. Pretty low in Air Force, toy standards. But when you put all these sensors on, which some of these sensors are state of the art, there's brand new stuff out of the box, being developed, and there's more new stuff being developed today. These sensors, could be worth $250 million each, and you come in and do a bad landing, suddenly you've broken a focal plane that had to be grown from a crystal that took a year to grow. And, and that focal plane was $50 million itself, so it was really, really imperative that you did not break the sensor. That was the biggest thing. Get the jet down safely, obviously getting yourself safely, but you don't want to break any of that equipment. So you're getting the jet you get it to 2 feet, you get the as you're holding it there, as we know, the angle of attack is going to keep, you're going to have to increase the angle of attack as you slow down, just to keep the jet flying. And as you increase that angle of attack, that tail wheel is going to drop. And so from the mobile's perspective, he sees the tail wheel go from being above the main to level with the main to being below the main. And that's about the time the jet's ready to land. And then you just put it down softly. Again, keeping it straight and then keeping the wings level, and also trying to keep it on the center line. It really is a juggling act, and it's kind of comical and scary when you're teaching you guys how to fly this, watching them try to put this all together. And I know from myself, I remember how it was, but it really is a juggling act, and even once you're on the ground, it's some of our times we've taken jets off runways have been once we've been on the ground, where suddenly a gust of wind will suddenly make you do a ground loop or whatever, and so you have to keep flying the aircraft all the way down to a stop. So it's it really is. I tell people this with all seriousness, I've flown a lot of aircraft, and you get pretty comfortable in the aircraft after a while, and I'd say it's things like landing and stuff. They're still serious, but you're comfortable bringing it in. I know that the C-21, T-38, all those, they're it may not be the prettiest landing, but you're never really. I would say your blood's not pumping really fast. But the U-2 with almost 2,000 hours in it, I'm still sweating as I'm coming down final in that. Even though I'm literally only going 75 to 80 knots, and but I know I have this aircraft that can easily hurt me in an instant, or I could break something. So it was a pilot's airplane. All these controls were, basically say stick and rudder. We actually had a yoke and rudder, so they're all cable controlled. When you're fighting the wind, you're literally fighting the wind out there, and it's giving you immediate feedback right through those controls. And And as I told my students when I was teaching, I'm like, you're either flying the plane or it's flying you. And if you're sitting there doing nothing with the controls, the plane is going to be flying you all around the sky. So it is a constant fight. And when they call it the Dragon Lady, it's no joke. So it flies great at altitude, performs like a sports car at 65,000 feet. Down low to the ground, it is a wrestling match. You're wrestling the dragon every time. So
A typical tail dragger. It's not done flying until it's in the chocks, right?
exactly, yeah.
We have some questions that have been submitted by some of our viewers. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, go ahead and jump onto the comment section and go ahead and ask some questions. So, let's see, Brian Huberty, who's watching on YouTube, wants to know why the Air Force is still flying the U-2s, because many thought the Global Hawk would make U-2s obsolete, but it's kind of not been the case.
I would say that the Global Hawk it's a great concept. I mean, it was obviously I don't speak for the Air Force, obviously, and I have a slightly biased opinion, obviously, against unmanned aircraft. But the Global Hawk could fill a really important capability out there. I think that it was kind of implemented. It could have been implemented better. They kind of sold it as more than what it was capable of initially. And the biggest thing is that the U-2 is, everyone talks about being an old plane, but really it is a capability to carry sensors up to a high altitude where they can collect from a long range. And one of the biggest things, the U-2 has a big engine. It can go high up, and then it has a very big generators as well that can power lots of equipment. We got into something like the Global Hawk. I know that there were you have power issues, and things like a radar camera, that are taking pictures using radar signals. The resolution of that image and how far you can collect is directly correlated by how much power you can put behind it. So something like the U-2 is just built to be able to provide that capability. And and it's not really as there is a big aspect of it, manned versus unmanned. I know there were a lot of times where having a person in the cockpit basically meant that we were going to collect properly versus I think if someone wasn't in the cockpit. But really it's just the capability that the U-2 brought to the table. And whereas I know that the Air Force for years had basically said the U-2 is going to go, it's on the chopping block and stuff like that. It was really, us going out there and being involved in these operations in Afghanistan, in the OIF, OEF, and in Korea, and all these other hotspots around the world. And it's the geographic commanders in those areas, the 4-stars in charge, that basically said, you're not going to take away my U-2. It's too important to me and to what I'm doing. So it's not a political thing. It's not to make a certain manufacturer happy. It's just the U-2 is providing me with what I need right now, and you cannot take that away until you find something that can do as well with that. So kind of a long answer to it. But the Global Hawk, it definitely represents something that could provide a very valuable service out there. But it was never designed to be, and never going to be, a full replacement for the U-2.
Great. We're talking with Lieutenant Colonel Ross Franquemont, who spent 14 years flying the U-2, and a couple of other questions. We've got this one from Facebook. Andy Swanson would like to know, how many orbits around the Earth do you think you've made?
Oh man, I don't know how many. I have around just shy of 2,000 hours, and I'm so mad. I ended up with literally within 10 hours of 2,000 hours in the U-2. But averaging that out, I don't know. So we'll say, at least probably 25 times around the Earth, but obviously that's just kind of multiplying out how fast the jet goes with how many hours I've had in it. Obviously, some of the low altitude training stuff's obviously slower. But I can tell you that there are certain parts of the world that I've seen many more times than I would ever want to see, probably. Um, uh, but the big thing on that is that even when you're over a like war zone from 70,000 feet, everything looks beautiful still. Even though you're in a dusty, deserty area, it's still beautiful to be able to look down on the earth from 70,000 feet. So.
YouTuber Time Space wants to know about altitude, speeds, and your longest mission. Just the declassified stuff.
Oh yeah. I know that we can say that the U-2 flies above 70,000 feet. That's kind of the unclassified version of that. As far as speed, we're typically it's not a fast jet. We're not like the SR-71. Because of those long straight wings, you can't really get into much of the transonic region. So that typically we're flying about 0.7 Mach, which in altitude you're looking at around 400 knots true, which is funny, when you're looking at indicated airspeed versus true airspeed. 400 knots true at 70,000 feet translates to around 100 knots indicated. So you'll actually be in like 98, 99 knot indicated airspeed, and you're going 400 knots. Typically, there's not usually a whole lot of wind up there. So that's typically not a factor. I think about the most I've seen up there is about 50 to 60 knots, and that was kind of rare. Usually, you're looking at less than 10 knots or less of actual wind. So wind isn't a huge factor on your ground speed, but that's basically the speeds there. My longest mission, I can tell you, was about 12 and a half hours. That's what it was. Actually, I went out knowing that it was going to be about that long. I've had a few that came close, where I had one that was it's supposed to only be about a 9-hour flight and turned into 11 and a half from a divert from crosswinds, and then it turned into an emergency at the end where my fuel stopped feeding properly, it ended up working out okay. I thought I was going to lose the engine for a little bit, but having to go in at night in a strange place, doing a spiral down, what they call an FO pattern, or a flame out pattern, or actually a precautionary where you're just prepared for the engine to quit. That was an interesting experience, especially coming in at 11 and a half hours after I took off, which, if you then add in the fact that I actually got in the spacesuit an hour prior to that. So, I've been in the spacesuit for 12 and a half hours by the time I was on the ground there. You have to, and like I said, taking care of your physiological needs, making sure you're physically able to go, it's no joke in that, because we've had missions lost, where if guys weren't up for that, or your body just couldn't take it, so it was always a big thing. You had to make sure you were mentally and prepared, ready to head on that mission. You never knew when it was going to turn into something like that.
Well, you mentioned a 12-hour mission. How do you keep yourself hydrated during that mission? I mean, can you eat or drink anything while you're in the suit?
Yeah. So the we would bring along bottles of water. They had these big bottles with a big long straw. I should get some of those in prop. That's good. Reminds me. But in the side of the spacesuit helmet, there's a little hole right on the bottom right-hand side. You could stick a straw up in there, or for water. You actually turn it upside down. You can drink water like that. Or we had tube food, just like you think about like astronauts eating. And we had a whole menu of those, and you'd actually pick out your spread for the day, So I usually did some chicken a la king. I liked the truffle mac, and there was a caffeinated apple pie. We also had caffeinated chocolate pudding, you could pick out. Some guys will go up with like 3 of these things for a 10-hour mission. Some guys will go up with like 12 things of food. Some guys would bring along, a bottle of water for every hour. I was somewhere in between, about every 2 hours. But I was during the mission. You had to keep yourself in good shape, and that did involve making sure you're staying hydrated, and that you're at least eating something every once in a while. So we also did have for the longer missions. We also did have some help from some, I would say, some pharmaceutical type stuff that they would give us it was in a nice candy gel form, and that was pretty good stuff. But that would keep you nice and alert and on top of things. So, but the as far as obviously drinking all that water, got to go somewhere. We did wear a device called the UCD, urinary collection device, and that you could go number one as much as you needed to, really, but there was none of the other stuff. So that was one of the things. You had to make sure you're ready to go and you're eating the right foods beforehand, and you got to know your body really well. And some pilots I knew they could probably go to like a chili dog eating contest and go fly a 12-hour mission the next day and be perfectly fine. And some people were practically starving themselves. I was somewhere in between. If I ate some nice, have something like chicken and rice the night before and eat some eggs in the morning, and it's pretty good to go. But yeah, you definitely had to stay on top of all that stuff.
Well, we've been seeing some of the photos that you've taken from altitude. How did you get interested in photography to start with?
I would say that when I came to the U-2, there were several guys who had been in the program for a long time, who had been taking some really awesome photos from the U-2. And I would say, pretty much everyone, when they go up in the U-2, they bring a camera and to get some shots. Because when I first going up, I was taking this little Canon PowerShot. It was like a little $100 digital camera, and even a camera like that looked amazing. from 70,000 feet, and would you could see some curvature and see the atmosphere, and I started looking at I could really if I started kind of studying this photography from from the aspect of learning some of the principles of photography and learning how to capture it and the lighting and the setting and everything, that maybe I could produce some of these photos like some of my photographic mentors had produced before me. And so I didn't get a nice camera, I would say, in the U-2 program for about 3 or 4 years. And after that, I started, I taught myself a lot about, again, those settings and how to get the right look, and I would have to, just like anything you're trying to learn, you go and you then kind of grade yourself. And I look at them like, I don't like how the reflections turned out in the window and stuff like that. Let me see what I can do next time to actually to improve that. And this is most of this work was done on training flights where I'm going up, and I'm not foregoing flying the aircraft, but I'm trying to learn this as well while I'm up there. And so it was really just kind of a process of kind of, I could make this look even better. I could do this. I can, in my last couple of years, I started taking what they call a panoramic, or a composite panoramic, where I take like several photos and then combine them all together to make, an even larger view of what I'm looking at. And, there's an artistic aspect to that, obviously. And, they're showing that the eclipse photo that came up, that's obviously a composite of using a lot of shots of the sun and the moon there over on another wide angle shot. So I started looking at things like doing like that would some of them obviously exaggerate the curve that I'm seeing, and that a lot of that's more for the artistry of the shot and the way the panoramic actually kind of puts it together. But it's no joke. You're actually, when you're up there, you were seeing the full curvature of the Earth around you and stuff. So, um, it was really just a process trying to show that off. And, and my whole goal is, like, I'm seeing this amazing view, and I'm like, I want my friends, I want my family, and I want all them to be able to experience this as well. And in the last few years, that some of that started going viral. Some of the photos out there, and picked up by the Aviationist, and then CBS News picked up a thing, when I flew through the Northern Lights. And but I would say that all those steps I took, that were all deliberate. None of them just happened by happenstance. The Northern Lights photos are a good example of, I had prepared for that flight for about 2 years, and that involved, knowing exactly the time of year to do it. I knew, the basic flight route. I knew where I was going to be experiencing Northern Lights, and I actually got the equipment that I currently use was all bought with the entire intention of eventually capturing those Northern Lights. So I knew I needed a camera that had a really good low light capability, and a lens also that could pick up low light. And I ended up going with my Nikon D750, and I have a Tokina 16 to 28 millimeter 2.8 lens, and those combined, allowed me to be able to get these shots, which, when you're shooting from a moving aircraft, especially things like stars, things like that. So any kind of movement is going to throw off the picture, but you also need to have a long enough exposure to pick up that light. So it was a compromise of playing with the settings, finding out what settings actually work in that case. And some of it, it took previous flights where I, did some night flights and things like that. And I went out and kind of practiced some of the techniques, and then found, okay, yeah, that one didn't work. This one worked well. I need to concentrate on my focus a little bit more, because I really, I came up with a bunch of slightly blurry photos and stuff. It was really a process, and I knew I was going to build up to eventually fly that flight. I wasn't sure exactly the day. I just knew I needed to get it, obviously, in the winter to be able to see the Northern Lights. And it all kind of came together. Fortunately, I didn't know if there, I knew that I'd probably see some, but I didn't know how spectacular it was going to be. And it was with, of all the amazing kind of sights from the U-2, getting to fly through that was right up there at the top. We actually had a system. I think it was a Garmin Connect or Garmin Home. I can't remember. It was one of the GPSs I brought along for the flight, communicate with satellites to kind of keep a position of the aircraft, that other people could be able to track me on this flight. And it also allowed some texting capability, just simple text and stuff like that. And from my iPad, which was strapped onto my knee, I was using a stylus, able to text my wife, right in the middle of the flight. And I was like, this is amazing. This is incredible. And it was, part of the time I just had to kind of sit there and just kind of marvel at it and just watch it, and then I'm back to I'm like, I want to be able to capture this. And, and it was my whole goal going in, because I knew lots of people had flown this flight before, and this wasn't that rare of a flight, but it was something I had never done in my 14 years with the U-2. And so I went into it blind, just knowing that guys were like, hey, yeah, the Northern Lights are spectacular. I've never been able to get a picture of it. I don't know how you get a picture of it. I don't think a camera can capture that kind of stuff. And so I kind of made that my challenge. Like, okay, I'm going to capture it, and I'm going to try to, I don't know how it's going to turn out. We'll see. And that's, that's basically how that came about. That was kind of, I would say, my like coup de grace of my photographs in the U-2. It was all a process, and it was all planning to get to that point.
And your photography has also been recognized by National Geographic as well. You mentioned CBS News earlier as well.
Yeah. Yes. Actually, Air and Space magazine, that eclipse photo that had, I just entered in on a whim to see to see what they would think, and ended up winning one of the contests with the Air and Space magazine. And then afterwards they got together with me and they said, "Hey, we'd like for you to do a story about that photo and how it came about." And you can actually read that story. It's up. It's both on my website at extremeross.com or over at the Air and Space magazine about flying through the eclipse. And that again, the whole preparation for going on that. I actually I would say I brought too much stuff. I tried to do a little too much, but I'm still happy with the way it turned out. But you can read in the story about how I thought I got nothing, and everything kind of went wrong right at the wrong time on that flight. But they asked me to write him something for that, and actually I got around to finally writing that, and it was right after I flew the Northern Lights flight, which that happened about 6 months after I did the eclipse flight. And I was, I'd flown to England on the Northern Lights flight, and I had crashed at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon because I was, dead tired after the 12-hour flight or so. And I woke up at about, 1 o'clock in the morning and like, I'm just going to write this thing out. So I banged it out on my phone and sent it over to the person I've been working with at Air and Space. And they liked it, and eventually got it published. It took a while because it actually took until I retired before we could actually publish it. But we did get that published, and I'm very happy with how things turned out overall. And and I'm still trying to learn today. I'm still working on my photography. I'm working on videography now. I'm thinking, looking at trying to step up doing some video production, and also, helping out in my community here. I'm doing some real estate photography stuff, and helping out some of the local realtors as well around here. And even with that, I'm learning the proper way to shoot a room. And there's a lot that goes into that as well. So it's still growth. Trying to learn new things and just get better, and to really kind of try to be the best. If I'm going to take it up, I might as well try to be the best. At least give it the best effort.
You mentioned your website, Extreme Ross. Tell us a little bit, just quickly, about what we'll find there and how people can get in contact with you.
So the basic website right now, it's just extremeross.com. If you go over there, I've been working on building this over the last couple months. I've had some downtime. And I'd retired back in March of 2019, and in April I started working for a major airline. Currently, I'm not flying a whole lot with that airline, and come October, I probably will not be receiving a paycheck from them anymore either. So I started kind of building up this website, extremeross.com, and it's kind of grown, and I'm still kind of changing what I'm doing with it, but from there, you can basically see most of my photos that I've taken from the U-2. You can see that I have a lot of T-38 photos as well. And the big thing I've actually been doing on Instagram lately, I'm Extreme Ross over on Instagram as well, is what they call Ask Extreme Ross. So kind of like you've been having people ask questions here. So I've kind of thrown it out for people on Instagram to come over and ask questions. And I have a big list of questions, and I try to get to those. I don't get to one every day. Lately, it's probably been more like once a week, but I am running through those, and I try to provide some kind of insight into what might be a simple question. I try to provide some insight, and I know most people don't use Instagram for that. It's mostly the photos, but I try to provide a photo and a pretty good I guess description of what's going on, and in a little sometimes a little bit flowery, but trying to give people the experience, and both the pictures and the words. And then I'll throw that whatever I've answered on Instagram, I'll throw it on my website as well, on a section for Ask Extreme Ross.
Excellent.
It's also you can for any of the people in the local area around Lincoln and Roseville and Sacramento. So there's also links to what I'm kind of branching out into, working with, doing video production, 3D tours, and real estate photography and stuff like that. So it's, and I'm probably at some point I'm going to separate those two, but right now I'm just working off of one website. But you can find it all, and almost all the photos, I would say, you can link to them to download full resolution for free. I don't charge anything for most of the photography out there.
Great. Well, Ross, we appreciate you taking time to visit with us and tell us a little bit about the U-2 and share those amazing photos that you took at altitude. And we really appreciate it, again, as you share your spirit of aviation with all of us. And have a great night. I'm Steve Buss.
Thanks a lot, Steve.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks a lot.